All right, let's get right into this. We're about to explore a pretty unique story, a parable told not about a person, but, well, by a building. This is essentially the confession of the seven-chambered Abbey, a fortress of pure opulence that's going to tell us the story of its own life, its incredible arrogance, and, of course, its ultimate doom. And boom, right there, we hear its voice. You gotta understand, this isn't just a pile of rocks we're talking about. This is an ego that's been carved out of marble. The Abbey literally sees itself as a living God space, a conscious being built not just for people to live in, but as a monument to its own power over the natural order. This single thought, right here, it sets the stage for the entire tragedy. So we start with Act 1, a fortress of ego. This is where we get to grips with the Abbey's starting point, this absolute rock-solid belief in its own perfection and its utter contempt for the messy, decaying world it has walled off. And what's so fascinating is that the Abbey itself knows exactly what it is. Its core trait is hubris. And this isn't just being proud, it's a very specific kind of arrogance. It's the belief that you are so perfect, so brilliantly constructed, that the basic rules of existence, decay, disease, even death itself, they just don't apply to you. This right here, this is the Abbey's entire philosophy in a nutshell. It saw its own existence, its powerful, permanent walls, as the ultimate yes, a declaration of eternal life. And everything outside, the seasons, the cycle of birth and death, the Red Death itself, that was all an imperfect no, a flaw that had to be aggressively shut out. And this is how it made that philosophy real. Those gates weren't just a barrier, they were an act of violence. Teeth snapped shut. The Abbey wasn't just passively sitting there, it was actively rejecting the world outside, watching the plague destroy the land with this cold, almost twisted disdain for anything so frail that it couldn't build walls. Okay, moving into Act 2, you can feel how this arrogance starts to fester. In A Nightmare of Color, the Abbey's magnificent isolation begins to, well, curdle. Its confidence twists into this haughty paranoia, and its whole purpose shifts from being a protector to something much more like a predator. Now, this is so important to understand. Those famous seven chambers weren't just colorful rooms. The Abbey saw them as a kind of internal system, a sensory organ. It basically designed them as a one-way digestive tract, a journey starting from the blue of birth, moving through the stages of life, and leading always to that final black chamber of death. And here's where things get really sinister. The Abbey stops seeing Prince Prospero's guests as people it needs to shelter. No, they become temporary fuel. It doesn't want to protect their lives anymore. It wants to consume their vitality, their life force, just to keep looking at its own eternal, stony reflection. It becomes the warden of its own beautiful, deadly prison. You can almost feel the air getting thick, can't you? The very things that made the Abbey so stunning, the vibrant colors, the winding halls, they start to feel oppressive. It's like the walls themselves are closing in. The Abbey starts to feel this deep envy for the very world it shut out, and its gorgeous sanctuary turns into a suffocating, claustrophobic trap. And this all leads, inevitably, to the climax in Act 3, the uninvited guest. All that tension has been building and building, and now we get to see the unavoidable collision between the Abbey's absolute belief in itself and a reality that is even more absolute. So as the Abbey gets ready for this huge party, this grand masque, it decides it's going to make one final, ultimate display of its power. And it poses this central question: can stone really be more absolute than fate? The plan is to literally swallow the plague itself, to trap and defeat the Red Death within its walls, because it's so convinced its structure is stronger than destiny. And then it happens. The uninvited guest shows up. The Abbey describes this moment not as a person walking in, but as a hollow, silent weight that is in direct, hostile confrontation with its arrogant architecture. It's the ultimate showdown between a loud, proud illusion and a quiet, undeniable truth. In that single instant, everything just shatters. The presence of the Red Death is like a mirror. The Abbey looks at this intruder, and for the first time, it sees its own reflection, that its so-called life was really just a form of stagnant, leaden death all along. All that hubris just evaporates in a single moment of pure terror and clarity. The final confrontation goes down in the Black Chamber. The great ebony clock, which the Abbey calls its own narcissistic heart, it just stops.
As Prince Prospero falls, the Abbey feels its own identity, its solid stone self, start to dissolve. It finally understands that its walls are just as hollow as the masks all the partygoers were wearing.
And that brings us to the final quiet act, a lesson in dust. The fight is over, and now, lying in ruins, the Abbey finally gets the moral of its own story. Just look at this complete reversal. The God space becomes a lesson in dust. The violent shutting of its iron gates is replaced by the quiet embrace of darkness. Its arrogant, sacred yes to itself is totally silenced by the absolute negation it could never escape. It is a total flip-flop of its entire reason for being. So now, lying in ruins, the Abbey has found a kind of wisdom in death. It understands its new purpose is to be a warning that any attempt to build a cage against reality, to wall off the natural and necessary end of things, is always, always doomed to fail. It's finally part of the earth it once looked down on. And this is the Abbey's final thought. It finds a peace in its own destruction that it never ever knew when it was perfect and opulent. The embrace of reality, of darkness and decay, turns out to be more comforting and more true than the false security it tried to build for itself with iron and stone. So in the end, the question this whole parable really leaves for us is this one. What are our own self-made abbeys? What walls of pride or denial or just distraction do we build to try and shut out the things in life that are inevitable? The Abbey story is one heck of a reminder that no fortress, no matter how beautiful, can ever hold back the sunset.